All right, this is Mr. Loeffler here recording this reverse classroom mini lecture. And to start out with, we are going to need Notability open. You can see this is my Earth Science folder. Notice I have all 12 pages so far. We need to go get page 13, and we could probably get 14 too while we're there. So let's go into Schoology. Let's see if it's there. So there we go, observation types and data notes. Go ahead and pull that up. I'll put page 14 up there by the time you guys get it. I'm going to download it as a PDF, and it's going to put this into my Notability. Make sure it's going to your Earth Try 1 folder and import. All right, so today's mini lesson is about observation types and data notes, which ultimately leads us into graphing, which I'm going to have you try graphing something tonight for homework. Just one thing. So obviously when we look at this image of Pluto from 1996 versus 2005 when telescopes got a little bit better, and then of course the New Horizons space probe flew by Pluto in 2015, we can see our observations dramatically change. So obviously there's a lot to say about each one of them. Ultimately they're the same thing, but they look very, very different just because of our perspective. So you'll notice on the bottom here I have these 3 circles. One says vocab, one says key concepts, one says future test questions. Why don't you pull out a highlighter? Let's see how the highlighter does. That's mediocre. I think I'm just going to use a wide pen here and fill this in yellow. And then the other color that I need is green. That's for key concepts. So as we go through the notes, if you want to underline or highlight anything in either yellow or green, that's what it represents. And then the last color is going to be pink. So let me prep that, and I'm going to go ahead and put that in there. Now, future TQ stands for future test question. So we'll use this the entire school year, literally, yellow, green, and pink for what those things represent. When you take notes, you're highlighting those standout features of the notes themselves. So obviously, here it talks about where we would kind of remind ourselves, our neighbors, what is an observation, right? So I'm just going to add some notes here. I hope you would write the same thing. So an observation is the use of your 5 senses to document things that are observable. So the key thing here, of course, is 5 senses, right? So notice I underline it in pink, potential test question, right? So those are observations. They are fact based on what you're seeing. They are not opinions. Because that's an interpretation or an inference. Now, anytime during this presentation, press pause so you can get caught up. All right, our next slide here talks about what to use and not to use when you're doing observations. So I'm just going to draw or snap a line separating these 2 sides. So we got the use and not use. Obviously, when we're writing down observations, anything with colors, great. For example, in our colors lab, saying red was at the bottom of the graduated cylinder is wonderful. Anytime we can use numbers, that's fantastic, right? That's quantitative data. So saying that the yellow liquid went from 0 to 3 milliliters. And if we want to use percentages, that's also really good too. We're really good as human beings at measuring quantity of fullness. So like 50%, 70%, 100%. So if I dump a grain of sand on the table and say what percentage of the grains sands are black, you could kind of peruse and look through them, and you might say 10% of the sand is black. So percents are great. These are all great kinds of data. What not to use, your opinions, assumptions of past knowledge. And so even though you might know we're talking about density, we try not to use any of this stuff when we're making observations, like saying that red is the most dense. Well, yeah, we probably know that to be true, but it's not an observation. If we say red is at the bottom, and then later in a CER we talk about that we predict or believe that red is the most dense, that's the time to say that. And of course, you would have evidence to support it. So we do have a couple examples here. Mary had on a blue shirt with a red lettering on the front and white lettering on the back. The lettering on the front was larger than the lettering on the back. Those would all be great observations. The bad one, what not to use, it says Mary has an ugly, there's a problem, shirt on with huge red lettering, problem. And on the back was white super small lettering. Well, what is super small, right? Problems there. Now, when we get to qualitative, quantitative, what we want to write down here, what is what, right? Now, we already know that these come from the root words, quality or quantity. That's where it comes from. Remember, quantities are numbers. Quality is adjectives that describe it. So those are that's the hard part, is choosing things that are very descriptive. That's not an opinion. Of all the ones that are the most difficult ones to do, definitely these ones, because people want to use those scary words that are not great observation words. Rather, they are interpretation or inference type words like big, small, fast, slow. Top, middle, bottom could be dangerous if you're not really specific. So we got to be careful with those kinds of things. So we can graph this kind of data very easily. When you think of graphing data, you got the X, you got the Y axis, right? And we plot points on there possibly. And then of course we might connect those dots if it's a duration of time, like in a series of events, to get a line graph. So a line graph, for example, here in this case. Okay. Qualitative data, not as easy to graph. It is graphable, but it's not as easy. We have to assign numbers to adjectives, basically. Now, the next thing, and one of the last things you do on this little short presentation, is looking for similarities and differences. And we're focusing on, in this case here, just qualitative. So this is the quality information. So we're comparing these two hammers. So for the meantime, we'll call this one hammer number 1, hammer number 2, right? And we're looking for things that are the same, the similarities. And then, of course, we look for differences. How are they different? So I would recommend you do 2 for each. Something like that would be perfect. And you're writing nothing with numbers, just how they compare qualitatively, which is hard. It might be hard for some people to do, but the number one comes up next. This is the easier one to do. So once again, we're looking for 2 things for each, but this time we're using numbers only. So to point out the obvious, over here you might notice we got this little stone here, it looks like. And over here it looks like we get 2 of them. So we could talk about that being a difference. Do they both have stones? Yes. Right? These little rocks or pebbles connected to this axe or hammer or whatever this is. So look, I'll be looking for, when I see you next, looking to see that you have 2 quantitative comparisons and 2 quantitative contrast items. And same is true with this, right? To get you started on this one, by the way, notice that this hammer curves. This one is relatively straight, right? So we're describing features that we see. Here we got this longer piece here compared to this one here. If we're comparing, we can use long as a word or short as a word because we're comparing it to the other. As long as you describe it that way, you'll be just fine. So when you're all done with these notes, if you see anything else in there that needs to be highlighted or underlined in these 3 colors, I would do that. Obviously, when it comes to vocab, right off the bat, I am thinking of these things, right? Quantitative, qualitative, possibly test questions there for sure. Key concept, what comes from the word quality, comes from the word quantity, right? And we get numbers out of this. We can graph data very easily out of this. Notice that's all green because it's a key concept. And there are adjectives that describe it. All right. And then for now, what we're going to do is put an X on this one. And we'll put an X on this one. Next time you see me, we'll work on those together. So that's it for notes. Make sure you have this complete up to that point. And when I see you on Wednesday, we'll